Hi everyone, I'm Valentine, also known as Nelise, and I'm here today to talk to you about why you should be lying to your players. If you're one of my players, look away, maybe, if you don't want to know my tricks. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and I am going to try and convince you why you should be lying during your games. Alright, well, you've watched past the intro, which means my retention rate's at least good. So now let me give a disclaimer. When I say lie to your players, I don't mean pull things out of your backside and just lie for the sake of lying. I mean lie to further a story and to further the game. This is a big difference, and this is why when I say lie to your players, I mean a very specific type of lying and not blanket like anything that could be considered a lie. What I like to do is I like to keep my lies within 5 main categories, which I'm going to go over here. And a lot of them are categories that to a player either may not be obvious or would be within the realm of like glossing over it for the sake of the game, for the sake of the narrative. But before I get into why you should lie, let's set up how you can lie. So for me, when I DM, I tend to go with DM screens. This helps because it can hide your notes and it can hide your die rolls. DM screens are not necessary in the slightest. I've played without one before. I've played with DMs who haven't used a screen before. It's really up to personal preference. I say this at the start because a lot of what I'm about to say only really works if you do have a DM screen to hide some of your stuff. If you don't, no worries. You can take some of this video and apply it, or you can make up your own system, or you can not lie. But I'm playing the villain here. Lie to your players. Alright, so when lying about your dice rolls, the first thing that would be very helpful for you is having a DM screen. I've played in games before where I have all of my dice rolls out in the open, and I've played in games where the GM has had all of their dice rolls out in the open. I think it's a great way to play. I think it can also be a little bit unforgiving, which is when I tend to use this type of lying. So, in games where I have a GM screen, especially during combat, I try and keep a track of all of my players, sort of how they're doing, how their resources are being managed, where their HP is at. Just because in a lot of the games I play, what matters more is a story that we're building together and not necessarily rules as written. I'm in the firm believer camp of it's not rules as written, it's rules are wrong. That is a topic for a different day, though. When it comes to this type of lying, what I tend to do is if a monster crits, I'll have it just be a hit instead. Or if a player rolls, a 16 and the AC is technically 17, but the fight's been going on for a while and it's not fun for anyone involved, I'll be like, oh yeah, that hits. That hits. You knocked off some armor and your blows are easier to connect now. These are things that I like to do because it doesn't change a lot about the game itself, especially when used sparingly. It can make for some really cool moments about, oh yeah, we're making progress. It can really put a kick back in the gameplay at the table. I would suggest not using this type of lying all of the time. The more you lie like this, the more apparent it is going to be to players. As always, this is a tool to be used. I would recommend using it sparingly. Don't let every hit connect. Likewise, don't let the monsters keep missing all the time. However, when used sparingly, this can be a really fun addition to your games because it can give it a little bit more of a movie-like quality, which, especially in some groups, can improve the quality of game if you're playing high fantasy or if your players are a bit more narrative-minded. But when would you use this type of lying? So this type of lying, again, as mentioned, I like to use to further a narrative, to further a story, and to make certain moments in my game table stand out a little bit more. This is also one of the easiest types to implement because it does deal the most with the hard and fast rules, which is why it's here first, and we can sort of slowly sneak into the more emotionally charged things. But that's a little bit about lying about dice rolls, so let's move on to the next thing, which is going to be lying about hit points. Alright, so you've lied about dice rolls. Another thing that I find it's easy to lie about is hit points. Hit points very specifically from the monster side, not from the player side. Players have their hit points, they're supposed to be dealing with that, that's not your problem. Monsters, on the other hand, in Dungeons and Dragons, when you look at a monster stat block, it'll have a given number and then it'll have the dice that you would roll to determine a monster's hit points. I take that die roll to mean your monster's hit points could vary. And so, whatever number you're using, that doesn't have to be the exact number of a monster's hit points. This is applicable to other systems as well. I've used this in storyteller systems, where usually it's a 3-strike down policy in the game that I was playing. Sometimes I would have it be a 2-strike down policy if a hit had been particularly effective, or a 4-strike down policy if something hadn't worked quite so well. You can also apply this to systems like Call of Cthulhu, with, it's plus or minus a couple of hit points per monster. Regardless of what system you're using, I like to lie this way in service of my players. Generally, the last 3 to 4 to 5 hit points of a monster are not going to matter that much. So I like to have it be, okay, here's the number I have in my notes. Give it, in D&D at least, plus or minus 5 on each side. A lot of times players will kill things with extra damage, no matter what system you're using. So sometimes they can kill things with less damage than would be necessary. It kind of evens out in the end. I also can think it's really cool, especially if a player does something that's very effective or is very cool narrative-wise, to have that work. And when you have cool moments like that that could be made, honestly, let them have it. I really like to let my players have those cool moments because I find that those are the things that they will come back over and over and over and tell other people about. So that's why I like to lie when it comes to hit points. It's all about making things fun for the players, making things fun for me. I get to sort of pull my little marionette strings in the back, and when it looks like the monster's over, I can drop them down. This is another type of lying that's very close to rules as written already. So I find it's one of the easier ones to implement if you're not quite sure whether you do want to lie at your table yet. This is also another one where it's going to be a little bit less emotionally charged when you do versus don't lie, because most of it comes down to rule of cool. Would it be cool for the monster to die right now? And within, the last couple of hit points, within 1 or 2, injuries, usually the answer is yes. But this is also something that you can check with your players at a session 0 or even at the table. So that goes into hit points. I'm going to move on to the next sort of bit of lying right now, which is going to be difficulty classes, as they're called in D&D, or basically any sort of goal number you're rolling to hit. Okay, so you're playing a game. You've had your players roll for something, and now you need to determine success versus failure. Usually, if you're running a pre-written module, that difficulty class, as it's called in D&D, or your target roll, as it can be called in other systems, is already written down. It's basically your number to beat in order to succeed. Well, what if your player gets really close, but isn't quite there? What if it's not something that's in the module? What number would you assign to something like that? Or what if it's something that you really need them to succeed on because it has important information for a mystery they're trying to solve? You've got a couple of different options. The first option is running it completely rules as written and saying, oh, you don't succeed. Another option is giving them what I like to call failure text. So it's you don't see what you're looking for. Instead, you see this other thing. And that other thing could be you giving them the clue or a hint or something to push them in the right direction. Or you could lie about it. And this is what I like to do in moments that they really need some information, or they've narrated themselves doing it really well, it's encouraging role play, or it's just a fun character interaction. If the DC is, say, 19, and they roll an 18, none of them on the other side of the table, none of your players are going to know what that difficulty class was supposed to be. And yeah, it's really close. Why didn't they succeed? I'll just let them. I might not give them all of the information that they would have gotten on a stronger success, but I will still give them information. It's one of those things about, is it a lie or is it a flexibility in the system? It's a lie. It's a lie. I'm playing the supervillain here. It's a lie. This is something that I like to do because it keeps the game moving, which, especially on days when rolls are bad, the worst thing that I have had happen at a table is a game has come to a complete just grinding halt because nothing worked. So I will lie sometimes, and I will give them successes where maybe they shouldn't have had them. I do have a word of warning if you choose to lie this way. Make it believable. And what I mean by this is not necessarily make it believable in game that they have succeeded, but rather make it believable out of game that it was always meant to be this way. You, again, like all of these other tools, using this too much could decrease the quality of your game. If you can lie about things like this occasionally, drip feed them just a little bit of information, give them a small success here to encourage them to keep looking or to encourage them to keep role playing. I recommend you lie in those cases because it will improve your game in the long run. If you lie about everything, or if you allow, an incredibly improbable role to succeed, your players are going to catch on. And that's when you might start having problems with it. Successes are no longer going to feel earned. Wins are no longer going to feel like challenges. I suggest you use these sparingly, but they're another tool in your GM's toolbox, and I recommend you use it because it can be a powerful one. So, use this to kickstart your games a little bit. Use this to encourage your players. Lying about target roles is a lie again. They're not going to know what that target role is. You're setting it as the GM, or you're reading it off of a module. You can bend it a little bit. You can make it so that your players are able to succeed and then are able to continue.
Hello, this is VoiceOver Valentine, and I just wanted to mention quickly that what I said was not entirely true. In games like Call of Cthulhu, characters and players will have the target number on their sheet at all times. This makes this a lot harder, and I would suggest not lying in this case, because they will call you out on it immediately. Alright, back to the video.
So that's a little bit about target roles. I'm going to now move on to the fourth type, which is going to be lying about your narrative plans. All right, so we've talked about how to lie about things that have written down numbers on them. Now let's move on to how to lie about things that are a bit more esoteric. Narrative plans. So, when it comes to me, I tend to not run pre-written campaigns. I tend to write a lot of my own campaigns. This advice is going to be geared more towards self-written campaigns because of that. Though a lot of it is still applicable to pre-written campaigns, you just have to be a bit more careful about when you use it. So, when it comes to narrative plans, I generally have an outline of where my story is going, if not a couple of encounters planned out to do that day. Sometimes my players will pick up and will go completely into left field. That's how players work. Sometimes I'll be running a mystery about having a doppelganger in a city, and then my players will decide that the entire just political sphere of that entire nation is filled with doppelgangers. It wasn't at the time, but they got really excited about that prospect and really excited about the prospect of going on this mission to sort of root out the doppelgangers. And I don't even know if they had a plan at that point. The plan was just deal with them, but they didn't have a specific way to do that. Well, here's the fun thing about role-playing games. They're collaborative and they're at a table. So pulling back the curtain here, there were never any other doppelgangers. But they got so excited that I really wanted to reward that. And so I did end up putting a couple of other doppelgangers in positions of power for them to go and track down. They loved it. They absolutely adored that plot line. And as far as I know, I still get jokes about it because at this point, a lot of them know that there were never supposed to be doppelgangers. It's one of those things about if I had not lied about what was in the world, that entire story arc wouldn't have happened. And genuinely, I do believe that they would have been disappointed. because they thought they had put together the pieces, and they had put together pieces, and I wanted to reward that. And if those pieces that they had found and they had assembled had fallen flat, I don't think our game would have been as strong. This is what I mean by lying about narrative plans. You can have anything you want on your piece of paper behind the screen. You can have anything you want in your lore books, in your maps, in everything like that. Sometimes those plans can change. And you can be sitting there behind your screen and saying, ah, yes, this was the plan the whole time. And yes, you succeeded, you found it, and this is the plot that I was looking for, this is the plot I meant to have. And it can be fun. This is one of the ones that I like to lie about because I feel like it can give a sense of cohesion to a game, it can give a sense of narrative structure to a game, and it can give players a really big sense of success when they've figured it out. They've figured it out, they know how everything fits together, and that can be a really big boost to enthusiasm and to fun. This is also one that, because it is not lying about game things, it is lying to actual people. You really need to know the people you're playing with. I knew with that set of people that I could look at one of them and I could tell her that her in-game dad was dead. And come in a couple sessions later and have her find him alive. I also have players that I would never pull things like that with. And this is one of those things, and this is one of those reasons why a session 0 is very important, because it's where you can get to learn these things about people. I would suggest lying about narratives because it can make for a game that makes sense within itself. It can lead your plot in new, unique ways that you as a DM may never have thought about. I know for me, it's led to not only the doppelganger plotline, but a couple of other plot lines that are really cool and that I'm glad I could play through because I wouldn't have come up with that. Be careful with it, because this is where you can start to get in issues with your players. Especially some players, if you lie to them out of game like that, they might not feel safe around you anymore. They might not understand or know where you would stop lying versus where you would be lying. This is why, personally, I like to make a very big distinction between Valentine the person and Valentine the game master. Valentine the game master could be lying to your face. Valentine the person who is doing the safety rules and who is doing safe words, safety doc, stuff like that, will not lie to you. I like to do it this way because it gives you the ability to sort of slip into different masks. I mentioned earlier that I was playing the supervillain in this video, and I am. I'm playing the dungeon master who's sitting here, going, yes, yes, you will never succeed. It's all going according to my plan. And that's because it's a fun character to play against. That doesn't mean that I actually want my players to die. That doesn't mean I actually want my friends to think that I'm lying to them. It's all part of the theater of this hobby that we're engaging in. So, that is a bit about why I lie about narrative plans and a couple of warnings to focus on there. And this leads us actually into the last bit about presence. I would suggest that you lie to your players in service of presence. And I'll explain that one next. Presentation! All right, this brings us to the fifth and final type of lying for this video, lying about your presence. And this is going to be a bit of a different one because it's not something that you can directly say a falsehood about. Rather, this moves into the more improv and theater version of what GMing is about. As a GM, I tend to act a little bit differently than I do as an everyday person. Some might call it putting on a mask, some might call it putting on different hats. To me, I view it more as stepping into an acting role. When I am a GM, I tend to be a little bit confrontational. I tend to be, manipulative and working against the party and just a little bit like snake oil salesman-y. This is because in the years that I've been GMing, I find that players really like it to have someone to hate, someone to play against, somebody to push back, and to just make somebody's life a little bit harder. And so when I go to GM, I play against them a little bit harder. I say that I don't want them to succeed, that if they die, then they die. That's all there is to it. Um while also outside of that identity, us together knowing that I am not going to kill a player. And if I do kill a player, there is always a way for that character to come back. I should have said character there. I'm not killing people, I'm killing characters. Um, there is always a way for that character to come back. We can know that outside of game, and then as soon as we step into the table setting, I can ham it up a little bit. I can be the mustache twirling villain sitting here going, "You're never going to succeed, Obi-Wan." And this is what I mean by lying about presence. You can have two versions of yourself at a table at the same time. You can have the GM that's working against you, that's, pulling strings, that's playing the BBEG to win, to beat the players. And everyone at your table can know that that's a lie. Everyone at your table can know that you want your players to succeed, that you are only pushing back to make for good gameplay, to make for challenges for your players to overcome. This is why I've put it in the lying to your players video, because you're technically saying falsehoods. But it should never be something that's hidden from your players. In fact, if asked about it, I would suggest telling them, yeah, all of that supervillain, that's a lie. That is a role that I am playing. In reality, I don't want your characters to die. I want you to have fun. Ideally, you succeed, and if not, we figure it out at the same time because I don't have another plan. I like lying about my presence because it leads to fun gameplay moments. Because it's fun for me to sit back and to be a little bit evil with everyone there knowing that I only want what's best for my players and for their characters, minus a little bit of trauma. This is also where a lot of the emotional stuff can go wrong. Like I said, I make sure that my players know that this is a lie. If this is not clear to players, you can end up with scenarios in which people might think you are actually playing against them, which could lead to hostility at a gaming table. This is also something where if it's not clear during a session 0 or you don't talk about it just at points throughout the campaign, you guys might get differing expectations for a game, and that could then lead to problems. I've been lucky enough that I haven't experienced any myself. That when I've been GMing, my expectations have been clear, both to my players and their expectations to me. I fully expect this to change at some point because mistakes happen, problems occur, conflict arises. So I'm going to say sort of the same thing I say to everything. Talk. Talk to your players. Talk to them as people. And be forthcoming about what you're doing, how you feel, and listen to them. Listen to them. Don't take it personally. Take it as they are telling you what they need to feel more comfortable. They're telling you what they feel. Take it into account, listen to them, and then work with them to find a way forwards together. Be careful when lying. It's something that tends to be a bit taboo because it can hurt people. I do think lying has a great place at a game table, and it can make for some great moments. I also recognize that this needs to be dealt with sensitively, and that as a person and as a GM, you're going to have to make judgment calls on when to lie and when not to lie. I hope this video has convinced you a little bit on why you should be lying and when to hold back. When in doubt, I like to ask myself a question. Is me lying here making the game more fun for everyone involved? And if the answer is no, I don't do it. Lying is a powerful tool in GM's toolbox, and you are only making it harder for yourself if you don't use it. Like any tool, though, applying it incorrectly can lead to harm. So, use it carefully, use it sparingly, and above all, use it so that you can have better games. All right, well, as I'm losing sunlight outside, that is the end of this video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to leave any comments, concerns, further questions down in the comments below. And check out my Ko-fi or my Patreon if you want to get updates. From the last video, I have up a little sheet now about a checklist to use in your session zeros if you want. And I'm hoping to get up more PDFs like that in the future on different topics, obviously. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to hang around, check out some of my other videos, or wait for the next one. Good luck on all your gaming tables in the meantime. And we'll do it once more with feeling. All right, bye-bye.